everyone, so we're going to look at creating our own data first, and then we're going to be using Axios to call the information. So I'm going to be using github.io to store our data, and then we're going to be able to use the URL to that data file and use it within one of the mini projects that I will be setting up for us. And then this way I'll give you an example of how to create your own data, but also call your own data using Axios. So let's get started here. So I have a brand new project here set up. I'm going to just make a brand new folder, and I'm just going to make the data file first. So there's multiple ways you can set this up, but I'm just going to create a basic index.html, and then with some images and data inside, so then we can just start working on it. So what I'll do is I can create, let's call this project 1. Let's call it, I'll say data project, sure. Because we're going to store this anyways on github.io, so it doesn't really matter too much right now. I just want to go inside here. And then what I want to do now is I'm just going to create a new file. I'm going to call it index.html. And in here, I'm just going to set up a default template. You can always just go to W3 Schools, HTML template, just so you can have some sort of template when it's hosted on github.io. So the one I believe I used is going to be this one right here. So you can use any demo you want, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to, you can click on try it yourself, and then here's all the data. So all you really have to do, this is all the code, sorry. So all you really have to do is just copy this, and then you just have to paste it in right here. So now we have that default template, but the only problem is that this one right here has these images which we do not have within our, we don't even have a W3 images folder. So in order to fix this issue, we need to go inside here in our project, click new folder, and then we're going to call it that, W3 images, enter. And then you can see here we have the folder set up. Now we just need the individual images itself that are given to us, but because it's actually not really given to us, it's online, we still have to download them. What you can do is you can actually go right here. Let me just see, where is the example? Okay, here. So in W3 Schools, when you go to those HTML examples, you can right click on an image, inspect, and when you inspect this image right here, you can just pretty much hover on this image right here. It's w3 images/woods.jpg, and you can see here it says current source. So if you just click on that current source, it automatically gives you the pathway link to that image, but this is not enough for us, so we have to actually download it. We need to save the image, right click, save image as, and then what you're going to do is just go to your desktop. So I have a lot of files right here, or folders. Let me just check, where is it at? And let me see, what is our project called again? It is data project. Okay, so data project. And then I'm going to go into the W3 images to save it here. And this one, just make sure it's called just woods, because that's what they want you to call it. Save. And then that will download automatically into your folder here. And if I open this up now in my folder, desktop, data project, W3 images. So you can see here we got that image called woods. Now you can keep going and just click that X to shut it down here, but you can scroll down a little bit more, right click, inspect the image, and then you just need to again hover over that link and then click on the current source. When you click on it, you get the image, you right click it, save as, and then again you just save it in the right folder again, the W3 images. Don't change the file name because it's already set up in the code, the demo code for us. So I'm just going to speed it up here because I already have it downloaded. I'm just going to drag and drop it all over. Alright, so now that I have all the images saved in this W3 images folder, I can go back to the data project. Now that I have the index set up, let's take a look as to what it looks like. Okay, so right now you're not going to see anything because it does have to be hosted. So what we could actually do here instead is we could go back to our code. I'm going to try it this way. If I go here and then do Control Shift P, open with live server, just click allow access if something pops up. And there you go. If you open it up with live server, the images do work. If you download all of them and rename and just kept the same name, or else then you'll have to rename it in the code. But just this is what it should look like once you have successfully set up the template. And what I'm going to do is just save it right now. And we want to go on to actually putting this on github.io first. So then we have our own mini little free site given to us on GitHub. Now that we have the basic template set up, now we can go to our GitHub account, and I'm going to go to my profile, and I'm just going to double check to see if I have a github.io. No, I don't. Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to create a new repository for github.io. I'm going to click on new, and then I'll create something. So whenever you want to create a github.io repository, because you're only given one of these repositories per account, you can only create this once. So it has to be whatever the username of your GitHub account is. Mine is msucheducation. So it'll be msucheducation, and then it'll be .github.io. And this means that this is some sort of special GitHub repository which we can then use, and then it will give us a free place to host whatever applications we want here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this. I'm going to create the repository. And you can see here we got the basic github.io repository. And if you already had one of these repositories, you can reuse it if you want just by cloning it on your desktop, or you can just go to settings for your github.io, and then down here if you scroll down you'll see delete this repository. You can delete it and then start from scratch as to like how I set it up all the way from the beginning. But since I set mine up now, I'm just going to go back to my repository. I got this right here. I'm going to copy this pathway or link, and I'm just going to be using GitHub desktop because it's just a lot faster to do it this way. You can always use command lines as well, but I'm just going to clone a repository URL, and I'm just going to clone this on my desktop. Make sure it's on your desktop because it's a lot easier to work with it. So now that it's done. We have this empty folder. But what I want to do is I want to grab all this stuff that I made in the data project folder for that free little template website. I'm going to just drag and drop it into here. So now this should be in the github.io folder that you have on your desktop. I'm just going to close the other one down. I can actually delete the old folder, the data project one, because I just need to close this. And then now I can delete that old folder. And you can see here that now we have all the content in that new folder that we cloned on our desktop. I'm going to now drag and drop that folder into a new window on Visual Studio. So this folder, I'm just going to drag and drop it. And we can see we got the code here now in this folder. What I want to do now is I'm just going to commit and push all this code onto github.io, that repository. I'll say adding code and images, and then I'll push it to that main branch. So now that we have that pushed up, we can check online just to make sure we have that pushed up. Alright, so we got that right here. So it's going to take a few seconds, but on the right side, we will see some sort of link as to the code that we can actually see that's going to be hosted online on this free github.io site. We just have to wait maybe like a minute or two until GitHub refreshes. So let me just refresh the page again. And there we go. Here you could see environments. So after a few minutes or seconds, you'll see environments right here. And you can click on the GitHub pages. And then here you can see the newest one that's being deployed will always be at the top. So we're going to click on View Deployment. And you can see here that we have that mini little site with that HTML that we set up here on our free URL. Now what we want to do is actually store the data in another folder here on this free site, so then we can use it in a little sample project that we will get into shortly. Now we can start creating our data that we want to create in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a data folder, something like this, and I'm just going to make up this data. You can always make up your own style or format of data however you'd like, but this is just one example that I will be giving you, and it has a lot of really good useful techniques that we'll take a look at when we start calling it as an API call. So let's go to the data folder, and then we're going to make a new file inside here and call it education.json, because we want to make a JSON or collection of data in here. And what I'm going to do, as you know, whenever you have JSON, it always starts with an opening and closing curly brace bracket. And then this is where you start adding the data that you want to create in here. So what I'm going to be doing, I'll put these quotations, I'll call it BCIT. Then I'll add another. What I'll do is I'll just make this square brackets here. And then I will say in curly brace, we have business of media. And inside here we have other objects in here, and we're going to have sub department, and we're going to have a few different options here. Or the sub department is just what like a name for it will be: finance and insurance. And then areas of study, this is where we'll have the different titles of the degrees. And we can always add another one as well. I'm just going to copy over the data just to save some time here, but you can see here you can add as many different types or subtypes as you'd like, and I just grouped it in terms of this is one sub-department, which is accounting and finance and insurance, and then another subtype, which is the digital arts, media, and design. And then of course we can have like other departments instead of business and media. Maybe we want to have something like computing IT. So this is more of the computer science degrees. And we can put a bunch of different areas here as well. I'm just going to copy it over to save some time again. And right here you can see that I have a bunch of information, and I'm just kind of aligning it so then it's easier for you guys to look at and follow. But you can see here I have a bunch of information with either within curly brace brackets or square brackets. This will be really important depending how you want to grab the information. So we'll see once we get into the API calls how, depending on the types of brackets you use, how we can map through the information. So now what we want to do is we want to actually save this, and we're going to have to push this up onto GitHub. So we'll say adding JSON data, and I'm just going to push that up to the main. And what I'll do is I will go back to GitHub over here, and if I just refresh this page on deployments, eventually we will see this being updated. It'll just take a few minutes here, or a few seconds, depending how fast it is. But every time that you commit and push things up into the github.io, it will always automatically redeploy the site for you, because it's just trying to check for any changes to the site. So you can see right here that it's starting to deploy all the new data onto the site. So it's just waiting now. And you can see here that the old one just goes away, it's inactive, and then it just shows the one that is actually active now. So if we click on view deployment, we can see here that we have our site as usual here, but we also have our data. In order to navigate to the data there, you can see here that we have, in this folder structure, we have to go to the data folder, and then inside the data folder we need to go to education.json. So let's go back to the browser here. We're going to do / and then data, and then / education.json. And you can see right here, once you have properly set it up, you should see all of your data like this. You should see all of your data like this on screen. And there is a way to, like, you could see it raw data, or you could see parsed data. It's just a way of formatting and how you want to see it. But This is a great way to create your own data, and then we can use Axios in order to grab this information shortly. Hi everyone, so we're going to be starting off with a brand new Next.js 13 project. Now that we've done all of the setup of the data, and when we refresh this, we could see that we have the data folder, images, and the index.html, which has been set up in our environment on the right side over here. If you click on GitHub Pages, and then we go to View Deployment, you can see your site right here. And again, remembering that you have to go to the / and then education / data / education.json, because that's the files and folder structure. And this is what you should see, or some sort of version of it. And what we want to do now is create a brand new project with Next.js. And we're going to also be grabbing the data that we set up on github.io, but we're going to create a brand new project on a brand new repository. So let's actually open up a brand new project here. So File, New Window. And right over here in the terminal, we're going to open up a brand new terminal. And we're going to set up a project. I'm just navigating to my desktop. And then I will do npx create next app. And I will call this education project or something like this. You can call it whatever you like, but that's what I'm going to call it. And then we have to, when this shows up, would you like to use TypeScript? I'm going to say no. And then ESLint, I will say no, because I just want a pure Next.js project, just so it's nice and simple for us. Alright, so now that this is done, we just want to drag and drop this folder we just created, and we should see all of the default setup for this project. And right over here we have our pages, the default setup, and I'm just going to open a brand new terminal just so I can run it and make sure that this default template works. So I'll do npm run dev, enter. And you can see here, I already have another project running on port 3000, so it made it on localhost 3001. So if I grab this URL right here, and I go to our browser and open it up right here, you should see a default template for Next.js 13 that looks something like this. And what we want to do is we want to restructure this site just so we can grab the data that we want. And what I'm going to do here is I'll just minimize this for right now, and I'm going to go into index.js. And this is where I want to modify a bunch of the code here. So first thing we want to do is we need to actually find a way to grab the information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up the code slightly so then it's a little bit more organized. And what I want to do here is I'm just going to get rid of some of this code. Let me just see here. Alright, so I'm left with just this code in the middle right here. I just want it to be like super simple, and we can just grab the information and then use it. So what I want to do right now is first I need to find a way in order to actually grab the information. And in order to do that, I actually need to use Axios. So there are other ways of doing it as well, but I'm going to show you the Axios method first. So let's just type in install Axios. And we should find something over here. So Axios, npm I Axios, you can grab that. And we can stop the server right here because we need to install something. So npm I Axios, enter. And if we go to our package.json, we should eventually see something called Axios that has been installed. And right here, you could see Axios has been installed. So we can save that. And what we want to do is, let's go back to index.js. And what we want to do is now set this up. So I'm going to grab the data, const get school data, and I'll say async because we need to grab some information, so we need to do async await. So then it needs to wait for that information that we're trying to grab, so it makes that connection. So I'm going to set this up as constant result is equal to await Axios dot get, and we need to import Axios as well at the top here. So import Axios from Axios like this. And in order to add our link right here in the get part, we need to actually go to the URL pathway. So if we go back to our code, where our data is, so here's where we have our deployment in the github.io. If we go to view deployment and go to that link data/education.json, so this is where all the data is. In order to actually use this data, we can just grab the URL at the top, grab it, copy it, and then now we can go back to our code, and inside the get part, but we have to put it in quotations, we just paste that URL to the JSON data of information. And now what we could do is we could console.log result. Now, in order to actually see what the result is, we need to grab this data, but let's actually just set up a button at the bottom here. So what I'll do is I will set up a button and I'll say get all education, and I'll say on click we're going to do something. Only on click we will get the school data. Okay, I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to go back to the browser here. Let me just check here. So I need to do npm run dev in order to update this on the browser. And let's go back to localhost 3001, refresh the page here. And you can see that we got the button at the bottom. It says get all education. So if we right click and inspect, and we go to console log, there's nothing there right now. But if we click on this button right here, go to our console, when you click on that button, get all education, you can see that it brings back all the data. And this data is what we've defined in our github.io free link. This contains all of that .json data. So you can see it has BCIT, and inside the array we have business and media, computing IT, and you can see all of this information. This is something that we created. This is something that we can use. So this is a great thing about coding, is that you can structure your own information, you can grab your own information, and you can use it on the screen. So let's actually get into how we can display this on our actual screen. Now, next thing that we could do is we could actually start storing some information and saving the data so we can grab it and then loop through it later when we need to. So let's first start off with the actual business side of things. I'm going to create a num business media and then set num business media into a use state. And this is just going to be number value that will be stored here. And I'm also going to set up, let me see here, media length, set education. Okay, I will also add the education as well. Education, set education is equal to use state. And this one will be an array of information. So here we got these two use states set up for us, and we might need more later. We'll take a look at it a little bit later, but for right now, what we want to do is inside here our get school data function that we set up, we want to actually set some information. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set num business media to the result of whatever's being returned back to us, dot data, because we're trying to go into the data, and then dot bcit, because that's one of the pathways we have to go into, and position 0 because it's an array. And I just want to get the length of business media for this one, business media dot length. And what I want to do as well is I want to set education to an array of information, and we're going to return back the result of data from bcit. Save it. So another thing we can do here is we'll set up a constant of num study and set num study is equal to use state of 0. And what I want to do in here now is let's actually just create another button here, or another function. So there's so many ways to go about doing this. I'm just going to show you one way of going about this. Const, I'll say get count. Or I'll say get count and information. So here we can console.log business media, and because we have num business media here and we are calculating the length anyways up here, it will tell us whatever the length should be. So let's call num business media here, and then let's also console.log education so we can see all the information for education. And of course we need to set up another button. I'll set it directly under this button that we set up already. And here I'll say get count and info, and we'll say here on click is equal to get count and information. I could just copy this so I make sure I spell it correctly, and then the brackets at the end of it. Save it, and let's test this out before we go any further. I'm going to go back to my browser, and let me see here. Use state is not defined. Okay, we forgot to import it. So at the top here as well, we need to import use state from React. Save it. Go back to the browser. exit that, refresh the page. I'm just gonna inspect it again and check the console. So there's nothing right now. So first I'm gonna get all the education, and can't read property of undefined length. Okay. So let's see what is wrong here. So undefined property of length. So data.bcit, and this should actually be business media.length, not num business media, because we're not calling the useState, we're grabbing the information from the actual pathway. This pathway, remember, result. So if we go to result.data right here, you can see here we have data, and inside data we have BCIT, and inside BCIT it's position 0 we're looking at first, and then we're going to grab business media. Business media then contains all this information. So we are grabbing at position 0, we want the business media information, and we're grabbing the length of this. So we should get something like 2. Okay, so let me refresh the page here. I'm going to click on Get All Education, and you can see we got all the data again here, and we wanted the business media length of this. The length should be 2 because that's what we have in here. So if I get count and info, you can see here for business media we have the value of 2 because the length comes from here. And then when we grab the information, we grab the data information. So right here, if we go back to the code, we actually grabbed console log of education, and education contains the results of data in the BCIT array that has been stored in this useState array, and we are just calling education to display all that information in this useState array. So that's why when we go to our console log, we can see this information that has been saved now for us to use, and we're going to be able to use this information on our screen and display the information on our screen. Now what we want to do is let's set up the rest of the information here to grab a little bit more information. So let's say we want to also store some sort of let's say we want to store also the computing IT side of stuff, because when we go over here, you can see we have business media, but we also have computing IT. So let's also grab some of the computing IT information as well. So at the top here, what we could do is I will add another constant, and then I'll say num computing IT and set num computing IT. And we're going to make that a use state as well, and it's going to start at 0. So we're just going to grab the length and place it here. So I'm going to change this education here to education business media, and then set education business media. So then I can just specify it just for that one. And then I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to add some, I'm going to change the set education business media and store all of that data there. But what I want to do instead is I want to just store that business media inside here. And what I'll do is for the num study, I could set the num study to result dot data dot bcit 0, and I'll say business media dot length, and make sure that is a dot, not a slash right there. And that should be okay. And I'm also going to set the num of computing IT to the result dot data dot bcit position 0, and then computing IT dot length, because we want the computing IT length, because if we go back here into our browser, if we get all education, go to the data, you can see inside the data we got BCIT and we got business media and computing IT. So now we are just grabbing the computing IT information and we're storing it for us to use later. And what I got here is computing IT length. So we got that. And so that is good. And let me just check here. What I could do here now in this other function is I could console log out the num for computing IT, computing and IT. So num computing IT, so we can see the length of that. And here education, so it's not education anymore, it's just education business media. And we're going to save that as well. So let's actually save all this, go back to our browser, refresh the page, and I will test this out now. Get all education. We got all the data here. Now we're going to count and info. So you can see here for business media we have 2. And if we actually go inside here, you can see that in business media the length is 2. In computing IT the length is 2. So that's how we get 2 for each of them. And we got all the information as well that we need for just one side of things. We're just grabbing the business media, all the data for business media right here. And now let's actually look at how we can display the information on our screen and not just have these buttons right here. So now that we have the basics set up, we're going to just set up what we need to display on the actual screen now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just move these buttons up inside the div here. And what I'll do is under this div, but above this main ending tag, I'm going to map through some of the information that we have grabbed now, and we are going to put these curly brace brackets, and then we're going to, based on the num study, as long as the num study is greater than 0, so as long as we have some sort of data, let us loop through it, and we'll say education business media dot map. We're going to map through it to grab some information, and we want to, based on the education and index, we're going to loop through it. Based on the education and index, we're going to loop through it, and we're going to have a div here now, and in this div we will have, let's first just grab one item at a time. So I'm going to bold it, and I'm going to say in curly brace bracket ed dot sub department, because that's what we called it in the API key. So I'm going to show you there's going to be some sort of error here before I fix it. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to go back to the browser here. I'm going to refresh the page. And what I want to do here now, if I click on Get All Education, we see it here in the console. And if I get Count and Info, it shows on the console as well. So what we need to do here, it looks like it is having a hard time looking at the value num. So num education. Okay, so it looks like we just did not the num study should have a length. So let's actually set this up because I don't think we set it up. That's why it's not showing. So we do have num study, num study, num study. Okay. Education, business media, education, business media. Map through it. Okay, let me just stop the server here and just rerun it. And I'll go back to the browser, refresh. So I'll get all the education, get count and info, and let's see here. So we're missing one thing. Okay, so I think I see the problem. It's just the brackets here. Instead of curly brace bracket, it should be rounded bracket. So make sure you watch out for these brackets. Should be rounded bracket around everything. Save it. Let's go back to the code here. And I'm going to refresh the page just so we can start from scratch. Get all education. And when I click on get all education, because now it's populating the information in our use state, you can see it shows up on our page as well here. And if I get count as well, it'll grab the information as well a second time. But you can see here that in the first and second departments, sub-department areas, we have accounting, finance, and insurance, and then digital arts, media, and design. And we can see that it shows up on our screen because we have something that we can populate the screen with. So this is how you go about populating or grabbing information from online and then displaying it on your actual screen. So I'm going to also show you how we can loop through another set of data within this data set. So because we also have another area, it's study. So if we go back to the browser, we have this thing called study as well that has even more information. So we can put a loop within a loop and then just grab the info we need. So all we have to do is, let's say I want to stylize it as a unordered list. And I'm going to put the curly brace brackets here. And then I'll say num business media is greater than 0 and education business media with an index because we want the position dot study dot map with the rounded brackets. Make sure you use the rounded brackets. And then I'm going to just place it on the next line. And then in the round brackets again, I'm going to put S, comma, index 2, and then the arrow, and then another rounded bracket. And then here I will put LI, and I'm just going to call S for each individual item. And before I add anything else, I want you guys to see what's happening here. Okay, this should be a rounded bracket at the end. Round. Okay, we're missing a curly brace now, so make sure I have the curly brace closing. So always watch your brackets because it'll cause a bunch of issues as you've seen. Save it. Before I call the index, I want to show you what that error pops up as. So refresh the page, and I'll get all the education. And you can see here that it does work, but there's still some sort of warning error. It says each child in the list should have a unique key prop. So it's just saying that each of these individual bullet point items should be something unique, and that's why we have this other one called index 2. So what we can do here is just say key is equal to, and then the curly brace bracket, index 2, and then save it. And then we can go back to the browser here, refresh it, and I will click on Get All Education. And you can see it says accounting, finance, human resource. That's exactly what we put in the data. If we even open up the data here, so for both business and computing, you can see here that the subdepartment for this, so we're just doing business and media actually. So when we look at the study for both of these, you can see there's 3 items here in this array, the first one, and then 3 items in the other array, and it's displaying exactly what we want on the actual screen here. So this is how you grab information and then share it on the actual screen. And let's actually inspect each item here. So it's not actually gonna make that index key. It's just more of a backend kind of thing. We need to have that unique key identifier in the backend, but you can always make your own ID later on, or you could just make it yourself. Let me try something here. So if we want to actually put some sort of ID is equal to, maybe you want to make it ID plus index 2 to add a number to it on top of it. Let's see if that works. And then I'll right click, inspect. Okay, so it does work. So you can always like change the IDs if you want to grab specific or give specific ID names. You can see though that it's automatically generating for us. And this is how you are able to create your own data, manage your own data, grab your own data, and then just display the type of data that you want and in any shape or form. You can see you can just add the UL and LI or whatever stylizing you want in order to have that display of information that you need. I'll also put the link down in the description box below that will lead to the GitHub page that contains all this code so you can reference it for yourself. Now what I want to do before I end this video is I want to actually host this code on Vercel, but also save this code on GitHub again. This is going to be on a brand new repository. So I'm just going to go to GitHub. And what I'll do for this one is I'll call this a new project, and it'll be education project 1. So education project 1. You can call it anything you like. You can call the repository anything you like. And I don't need anything else. I'm just going to create the repository. And then what I'll do is I will need to clone this on my desktop. So what I could do is now grab the URL pathway for this, copy it, and then go here, File, Clone Repository, and I'm going to clone it on my desktop now. And what I will do is, once that is done, I'm going to have to drag and drop all the files and folders into this cloned repository on our desktop. I will first have to close it down. I'll just close this here in Visual Studio Code, just so it doesn't get confused. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy, and then I'm going to paste it over. And I just want to double check something here. When I open up Visual Studio Code, I'm just going to go New Window, and I'm just going to drag and drop this folder over. You want to make sure that you have a .getignore file here, because we don't want to upload this node module or any other like .next or like random files that will make it hard for this code to run because we are going to host it on Vercel. So if you do not get rid of the node modules or any other of these other random files, then it could potentially crash and not work with Vercel. So you could always check and reference the link down in the description box below. Just make sure that you have these codes here in, or these lines of instructions here in your .git ignore before you get started on the next part. So I'm gonna make sure this is saved, and I'm gonna then go back to the GitHub desktop, and you can see here there's a bunch more files and folders to commit. So I'm just going to say adding files and folders. And I'm going to publish the branch, or publish to the branch to update it. And if I go back to GitHub, let me see if refresh. Okay, so if we refresh, we should have something like this set up now. So we have the default pages and folders all set up here, but you can see that we don't have anything on the right side that will actually be an environment or we could click on. So we need to connect it with Vercel in order to host this site. So what we can do is we can go to Vercel. So you just need to log into your Vercel account. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go here to add new, and then I'm going to say project. And then right here, you should automatically connect to your GitHub repository, or you can add a GitHub account. So I'm already connected to my msuch education GitHub account. So what I can do is, you can see here we got all these repositories listed down below, but I want to select the one that I just created, which is the Education Project 1. I'm going to import it. And you shouldn't have to change anything here. If you set it up as I mentioned, you just click deploy. And once you've deployed it, you should get this congratulations page, and we want to just test it out to make sure it properly hosted. So click on continue to dashboard, and then here we're going to just click on visit. And here we should see exactly what we've seen before. So it looks like we got get all education and get count and info. So if we click on get all education, you can see here that we actually see it here on our screen. We right click inspect, and then we can click on also the get count and info. And then we can go to our console log, and you can see here that all the information shows up here in our console log as well. So if you've done everything correctly and you're up to this point, you're pretty much done this project here. So this is a great way of knowing how to just grab your own data, make your own data, and then display what you need on screen. So I hope this helped you guys in just the way that you're going to be able to manage your data and then just have fun creating your web app.